This episode first aired on the Rambling Runner podcast. I had so much fun chatting with Matt, and I'm excited to share with you as a For the Long Run episode. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. Thank you to Tracksmith for their continued support of this podcast. Tracksmith is an independent running brand inspired by a deep love of the sport. Their new fall collection just released and is now available. It features staples ready for all of your training and racing needs. As the weather begins to change, versatile pieces are essential for handling whatever the season holds. Tracksmith's Twilight Quarter Zip and Horizon Long Sleeve are standout transitional pieces on the run. The pin dot mesh of the Twilight Quarter Zip makes for a lightweight and airy top that can be layered or worn on its own. The Horizon Long Sleeve delivers the familiar feel of cotton with the performance of a tech blend that can be put through the paces and then be worn out for coffee afterwards. By using code FTLR at checkout, you can receive free shipping and support Bigger Than the Trail, an organization that is using trail running as a platform to advocate for mental health. This episode is brought to you by Freedom Solar Power, the company I use to go solar on my house. Go solar this year and you'll get to take advantage of the 30%, yep, that's new, federal tax credit next year. It's time to break free from rising electricity costs. When I first started looking into solar, I thought it would be a clunky and expensive process. Going solar isn't as hard as you think it is, and Freedom Solar is a turnkey solution focused on educating the consumer and making sure they have all the information they need to make sure going solar is right for them, both financially and as a way to help the planet. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, Florida, and now North Carolina too. There are plenty of other great options nationwide. I have a super important question for you. Are you giving your body the nutrients it needs to help bolster and protect your immune system? How do you know? Friends, I'm here to help you eliminate the guesswork with two products that have had a huge impact on keeping me healthy and strong during my training and races that I strongly encourage you to try. Previnex Probiotic and Previnex Immune Health Plus are powerhouse products that can help you perform at your best and keep you healthy, especially as we move into a season where bugs that can take you down are everywhere. Use code FTLR for 15% off your purchase at Previnex.com. That's Previnex.com. And we're live here with the Rambling Runner podcast.
No, preempting me. This is what happens when you interview a podcaster. They think they're the host. I'm the host, John Levitt from For the Long Run podcast. Back again. Not only from For the Long Run, also a good friend of mine, John. It's great to have you back on the show.
Guess who's back? Back again. Matt, thanks so much for having me back on. I didn't say too many crazy things on the first round, so here we are.
So let's do it. So people may not know this. I call John like once every 2 weeks, if not more, just as like my walking, talking sounding board that I like to throw things off of and get his opinion on. So we're not going to do that today. We're going to have a more fruitful podcast related conversation. And I'm so excited for that. So Jonathan, you live in Boulder, Colorado. You used to live in the Boston area. You grew up around Boston, close to where I live as well. Last time we talked a lot about that move, how it changed you as a runner, and how like a lot of things shifted in and around that time. One thing that we didn't really touch on a lot in that conversation was competitiveness and competition and things like that. So I know you as a competitive guy. I know in your professional life, you are a competitive guy. You're driven by metrics. You are really very, very good at it. And it's something that's a major part of your life. And with running, you also were like that. As we chronicled before, you were after hard breaking 3 hours in the marathon. You were able to do that in Providence. And it was a really fun journey for a lot of people to follow. Since you moved to Boulder, it seems like you've taken a little bit of a different tack when it comes to competition and competing. Would you mind just walking us through the beginning of that evolution, how it started to shift for you?
Yeah. I mean, some of it was brought on by the pandemic and the lack of racing. And what I realized in 2020 as I was coming back from an injury and 2021 was that like I don't need racing and I don't need to put something on the calendar with a start and a finish line in order to be excited about training. I've shifted my goal from like I want to break 3, which I did, to like I want to run fast and far and have fun forever. So the goal currently literally does not have a finish line unless you consider the finish line, being 6 feet under at some point, very, very far away. But it's more about like having as much fun as I possibly can. I saw a meme the other day that said, what if we measured our success as runners by how much fun we're having? I'm the best runner in the world, if that's the case. Not all the time, but frequently. And to me, living in this playground of joy and tomorrow's workout, I'll do it on a trail called Anemone. It's a 5 mile loop trail with 1,000 feet of gain that happens in 2.5 miles. And it's like a playground. Like I get to do my 6 by 90 second hill reps with then 45 seconds faster, uphill, staring at mountains, staring at dirt, staring at people who think I'm a psycho, and just like thriving with it and building fitness so that I can say yes to anything with 3 to 5 days notice. Literally, like if you asked me my training goal 4 months ago, that's what I'd say, so that I can say yes to adventure in the summer. And that's what I got to this summer. I was in Tahoe, or before I was going to Tahoe for Western States, I don't know, like 3 days in advance, one of my coworkers was like, hey, you want to run from the Olympic Village to Donner Lake? It's 19 miles with 6,000 feet of gain. I was like, yeah, I could probably do that, because I've trained for those types of adventures. Now, the kicker was I didn't really have the fitness to do it because I hadn't been doing long runs thanks to COVID. But had things gone as planned, which they almost never do, it would have set me up well for that kind of adventure. Originally, the plan was pace Zoe Rome at Western States. I got COVID like 4 weeks prior to that, didn't do any long runs, and didn't have a desire to be stuck out in the canyons when it's 110 degrees, not knowing how my body would respond to that type of stress. Probably a good thing I didn't do that. It's taken me, quite a while to feel good after coming back from COVID. COVID itself was more of just an annoyance that like I couldn't hang out with my friends and I had the sniffles, and felt pretty fatigued for like 6 to 12 hours. But I don't know, 6 to 8 weeks afterwards, I never really hit my stride. And so that was the most frustrating part. As someone who just thrives with consistency, and like I really just love flow state, like I didn't feel that for 2 months. And we were talking about her prior to getting on the call. I ran with Kara Goucher last week, and like that was the first flowy run I've had since May.
Was it because of your health or the company?
Both help, but you can't have that flow state without putting in the work. And obviously the company helps, and like having someone who can talk for 70 minutes straight about really interesting things, and like she can just talk for the entire duration of the run, or we can have a really engaging conversation. Either or is totally fine, and we've done both. But in that scenario, like I blinked and 8.5 miles was up pretty quickly. And again, the company definitely helps, but you just can't get that without some level of fitness and health. And like I've been craving a run like that since the spring. And I'm hoping there's more of that in the future. But that's what I'm training for. Like, that's what I love. That, like, the community aspect, having good conversations with great people, doing group runs and having it feel effortless to, run a 5K with 30 people. These are the things that I've grown to love so much about running. And I put CIM on the calendar again because I really love to run fast marathons as well. I'm competitive with myself. I feel like I PR the marathon every 2 to 3 years. So
you're due.
I'm due. Yeah. Providence was 2019, but as our good friend Peter Bromka says, the marathon doesn't owe you anything. And my limiting factor in the past was I felt that the marathon owed me something. And I failed at breaking 3-4 times in that process, thinking I was super fit and I would just show up on race day and, yep, here's your sub 3. Here's a ticket to Boston and a very long bus ride out to Hopkinton, and have at it. And I stupidly didn't learn that's not the case until 3 or 4 years into this adventure, when I really started meeting people who were doing it right. No coincidence, it's when I started podcasting as well. And I got to learn from all these people that they're Olympic gold medalists or they're professional athletes. And none of them are, for the most part, none of them are so focused on metrics like amateur runners are. And none of them are so detail-oriented versus or outcome-oriented versus process-oriented. Now, if you want a completely different take on that, listen to my episode with CJ Albertson, because he's the only person that's like very much disagreed with everything I had to say in that regard, or everything I had to reflect on in that regard. But I took all these learnings from, 2019, and I must have done 30 episodes at that point, or 20 episodes, whatever it was. I was starting to learn and starting to notice some trends around what it takes to be good, what it takes to be great, and what it takes to be great for a long time. And I was so obsessed with breaking 3. I was so obsessed with the 6:51 average. I was so obsessed with signing up for a race and thinking Boston was on the other side. And I kept getting slapped around by the marathon. I liked it a little bit, but I obviously would have liked a better outcome. And when I lined up for Providence in 2019, I stood on that start line. I was like, I can do anything. And this is a celebration of the last several thousand miles that I've run. And I went out of the gate and I couldn't stop running 640s. And that's what I'm craving. I'm craving that, like, what are you going to get out of your body and how much is it going to surprise you, kind of a thing. And so CIM this fall, it's fall, but it's December, but I guess it's still technically fall. Anyway, I want that feeling. I want to be 15 miles in, 18 miles in, 20 miles in, and feeling good and feeling flowy and feeling like I know I'm in control. It's going to be hard, obviously. There's no reason to do things like run a marathon if it's not hard. Like it's hard. But I want that, like, what am I going to get on the day, with pretty good evidence to suggest that, like, it'll be something good. As long as I, get my morning poop and the weather's fine and I'm not late, kind of a deal.
Absolutely. All right. I love all of this. All right. Let's talk about the mindset shift that you mentioned was precipitated by some of the conversations that you had on your podcast For the Long Run, which is very well done. I can't recommend it strongly enough. Don't pause this podcast. Keep listening. But, after this one, people should check it out. With that said, I feel like we're missing a piece here too, because your coach, David Roach, espouses all of these principles. And yet it seems like it didn't quite take hold until you kind of broadened out and had more than just his voice in your ear, basically saying some of the same things. Would you mind just talking about how your ability to really not just hear these things, but to have them kind of fully absorbed into your being was a process. It wasn't merely like, well, coach said this, so I'm going to completely do it. Was there like a push and pull there?
I wouldn't say it was a push and pull, and I wouldn't fault it for not sticking. It was, some people try for 20 years to make this work and like learn these lessons of process versus outcome. And so the work that David was doing in the log and in the training log and in our conversations, we've done, 4 podcasts together as well, where again, no agenda in those conversations, really just like a exploration.
It's funny. He always interviews you. You never interview him. He's always like just asking you questions the whole time.
Yeah, we're overdue for one of those. And as soon as he has his little boy, I think we're going to do another one live. He doesn't know that yet, but yeah, I'd like that. But anyway, the question was, why did it take so long, or what led to this shift? Honestly, it was just like exposure therapy to so many excellent people saying it the way that it is, right? It's so fascinating that people who are paid to compete and paid to win and paid to go to the Olympics and paid to perform at the highest level are so focused on the process when the outcome pays their bills, right? So you would think that somebody who is paid, if they succeed by conventional measures, and that's another thing we should talk about, defining success. You would think that somebody like that is going to be singularly focused on being the best that they can, on winning, being better than their competitors. But that's so unpredictable, and you don't know who's going to show up, and you don't know who's going to be injured, and you don't know if the weather is going to be humid or cool or whatever. So all you can control is what you can control, which is mind-bending stuff right there. That's so deep, right? Just kidding. All you can control is what you can control. So why not control the controllables? And so once I focused on that, I really started to improve. So to me, the controllables are sleep, nutrition, mindset, and consistency. Everything else is totally out of your control. Weather, the people around you, etc. Freak injuries, you step off a curb wrong, etc. So when I started focusing on particularly mindset and nutrition, and like really, I've worked at Inside Tracker for 8 years, but I really started taking nutrition and sleep seriously in, 2019 as the mileage grew. And I did my first ultra in 2018. And that also was a huge mental shift. That led into that mental shift where suddenly a 2.5 hour long run was not all that long because I was doing 5 hour long runs. Now, you're a coach. I'm not a coach, but I don't believe that like most people should be doing long runs more than 2.5 hours long. But this was not for marathon training. So I was able to sort of extend that because I was training for something that was 40 plus miles.
Yeah, if you're taking breaks and you're also not running on pavement, there's like a completely different set of rules.
Totally. And fueling properly. And
yes,
so
absolutely.
Like running, a 5.5 hour marathon at Wachusett Mountain while eating beef jerky and drinking Coke and pickles and all this stuff. Like, yeah, 5 hours of that versus 2 hours on the road. Suddenly 2 hours felt incredibly attainable. So here was a mental shift of, well, it's actually not that long. And so everything became more bite-sized and more attainable. And so the mental shift was there because it became a little more accessible. The physical aspect became easier because I was paying attention to it more out of necessity because I was running 65 miles a week. And my, weekends were 30 plus miles. And that trajectory has essentially just continued through May of 2022, where I've paid super close attention. I've seen the progress I'm looking for. Then we had this little hiccup with COVID, which has been really annoying. And I'm hoping I can get back to some level of consistency and high level athletics that I was experiencing before. When I returned back to Colorado last year, like a couple of weeks ago, David put something in my log that said, when you land in Colorado, try to really set intentions for elite athlete mindset that you've mastered in the past. Maybe a bit of a grind at first, and that is unlikely to be fatigue and need for more rest, but need for more training. So I took a week and a half.
I know David obviously is a very good writer and he's a very good communicator. People listen to this podcast probably have heard his podcast, what he does with his wife, Megan Roche, as well. But obviously you guys have been friends and worked together for a long time. So when he says the elite athlete mindset, and you've mentioned mindset shift on your own as well, what is exactly, can you unpack that a little bit before you explain what it meant to you?
Yes. So David's take is that everybody can be an elite athlete if you think of yourself as such, right? It doesn't matter if you run a 2-hour marathon or a 6-hour marathon. If you are doing the things that elite athletes do, eat, sleep, recover, fuel, like practice gratitude, etc., all the things that allow highly skilled professional athletes to be highly skilled and like stay healthy. If you're doing all those things, you're an elite athlete. Like, it doesn't matter how fast or slow you're running in that aspect. So,
so elite athlete minus, so basically what we traditionally would think of as an elite athlete, everything that is encompassed in that minus the genetics.
Totally. Yeah. So that's the whole point, that all that you need to do to be an elite athlete is do the things that elite athletes do. What makes somebody elite? Consistency. How do you stay consistent? You eat enough, you sleep enough, you train to the margins, and sometimes a little beyond. And that's that. And so what I took from that, so when I was back in Boston, I took basically a week and a half off of running because it was like I was spinning the tires, nothing was happening, I'm stuck in quicksand. And I also got a stomach bug and like couldn't eat anything for 2 days, or couldn't keep anything in for 2 days. So I wasn't fueling at all, essentially, for that 48-hour period. I had no energy. And
I know how you feel about intermittent fasting. That must have killed you.
Yeah. If you're a woman, please don't. Anyway, and the research is decent on men, I guess. Anyway, so I just like, I wasn't having fun. I wasn't enjoying thinking about going for a run. So I did one workout in Colorado, flew to Boston, started an 8-mile run, ran 2 of those miles and walked home. And then I didn't run again until the next Saturday. And that was great. And what David's comments were, so people who are new runners get so frustrated by, like, I thought running's supposed to be fun. This is awful. Like, of course it's awful. Until you're consistent with anything, it's awful. And so I always tell people who are like getting into running that wait 3 weeks prior to making any decisions of whether you like it or not, which is a lot of time. That's like a minimum of 10 runs. So you got to get through that. So I don't know, I took 8-9 days off, and it felt awful coming back to it. And then finally it didn't. And so his point was, I need to just get back at it. Like, I was running almost 70 miles a week fairly consistently at altitude for months at a time last year. And like, I came down from Breckenridge where I felt like a superhero or Superman running 35 miles a week, came back to Boulder, got back up to 60 again, a bit more than that, went to Boston, felt unstoppable, and then trained, felt incredible, did a lot of things in the fall, and just like really found a groove with training. And so I think he was referring to like last spring, as well as basically all of 2020, where I was just increasing fitness, and also 2019, where I was definitely the fittest I had been up until that point as a runner, and probably in general, save for a few months last year. And again, doing all the right things, eating enough, sleeping enough, practicing gratitude, and doing things outside of running that make me happy. Now I've completely forgotten what the question was, but I feel like I've rambled as a runner.
I'm sure we got to it at some point.
If you've been enjoying this podcast and can spare 90 seconds of your time today, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review? It helps other people find and enjoy the podcast too. Thanks so much. Thanks again to Tracksmith for supporting the podcast and for their continued support of not just this podcast, but for the running community in general. I'm proud to partner with Tracksmith, and I'm excited that with all purchases made using the code FTLR, you will get free shipping, and Tracksmith will donate 5% to Bigger Than the Trail, an organization that is using trail running as a platform to advocate for and provide resources related to mental health. Thanks again to Freedom Solar for supporting this episode of the podcast, as well as our desire for a greener energy source. The buying process was fascinating and so eye-opening, most notably how simple and cost-effective it can be. I'm excited to pay my learnings forward. If you're curious, message me on Instagram or Twitter, and I'd be happy to help you get in contact with some great resources or even just answer some questions. Freedom Solar is a full-service solar company installing solar panels and backup power systems since 2007. They operate in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, Florida, and now North Carolina too. My parents have the same panels from a different company in Massachusetts. More than a few friends and podcast listeners have already gone solar, and they're all so excited and happy with the process with Freedom Solar so far. Previnex has amazing products that have benefited my health and the health of other runners that I know, which is why I'm so excited to introduce Previnex to you as our newest sponsor. They also have a killer everyday immune supplement called Immune Health Plus that I've been taking and will tell you about in a future episode, but I highly, highly recommend you check these out and try the products for yourself. One of the best parts is that if you don't experience benefits on any product within 30 days, they have a no questions asked 100% money back guarantee for a full refund. You have no risk and everything to gain here. Use code FTLR for 15% off your first purchase of any products at Previnex.com. That's Previnex.com. And I can't wait to hear about how these products are making a difference in creating health in your life.
So obviously you have quite a story here that I think a lot of people can relate to. Sometimes like the highs followed by the lows, certain things that are, explainable, other things that aren't, or just getting a rut that you really can't control, which can be really tough. Let's go back to the part that you mentioned before about pre-2019 or in around 2019, where your experience with what fatigue is or isn't started to really change. And I know that it continued to evolve in the few years after that. Obviously, the past 4 or 5 months has been a little different, but it really has evolved. So let's kind of do not completely chronological, but a little bit in terms of like, if you think back to some of those moments where in the moment or even like afterwards, like in your log, you're like, I reached my limit today. I could not have gone any farther. I was lights out. I could not have gone farther. And then inevitably you look back on it, you're like, you know what? I think I probably could have gone farther, right? Or like in those instances, in terms of like how you view fatigue, how it presents itself to you, and how you have learned how to maybe push back or reframe it to make it less of a debilitating thing in terms of its effect on how you're running or training, specifically in the long run, ultra marathon type training.
So I'm going to refer to a handful of different events. The first is my first 50K in November of 2018. The second is the marathon at Providence in 2019. And then a few weeks later, the Boulder 10K, and then running rim to rim to rim in, I can't even remember. I think that was the fall of 2019. Yeah, that's correct. So these were all places where, for the most part, in the moment, I thought I was like deep in the well, with the exception of, well, so like a 10K is such a different one compared to a marathon, compared to an ultra, right? You're never, you can't go to the well in a 10K until the end. And so doing it in a 10K is like a mix of, especially a 10K at altitude that's hilly, that ends on a hill. So that one was like, I'm pretty sure I rode the limit of my ability on that day, and I ran like 37 something. Or it was like
that is fast.
like low 6-minute pace for context. And I've not touched that in a while, those paces for that duration. I was marathon trained
at elevation on a hilly course.
Yeah. So 4 weeks prior, I ran Providence, and I recovered from Providence like I was running 3 days later and felt amazing. And my blood work from Inside Tracker was like, oh, maybe you ran like an 18 miler the weekend before. And like it was a tiny little bit elevated. It was the best post-race data I'd ever seen. That was my first marathon in super shoes, which definitely played a part. Anyway, so I think I was pretty close to the edge on that one, and definitely went to the well in the last quarter mile. The marathon in Rhode Island, I thought, basically I felt amazing for 13 miles. I felt all right for 5, and I made a conscious decision at mile 20 to like, literally what I said was make it hurt. And so in that moment, I was like, this is going to be uncomfortable. This is tiring, fatigue, as the word you used. And this is a good thing. And here's where you find out what you're made of, right? Like I wasn't running 6-minute pace. I wasn't running sub 6 pace. It wasn't like I could still think, but the deep fatigue of having run for 2 hours and 45 minutes was starting to set in. And in those last couple of miles, it was like, Matt Fitzgerald's book, How Bad Do You Want It? Well, I wanted it more than anything in that moment. And I've always wondered if like I lost an edge after succeeding at a goal I'd had for 4 years. And it's something I feel like I should talk more about with Gwen Jorgensen, who has become a really good friend of mine. And we go on these runs, and it's just like 8 miles later, I've just learned so much. Gwen won gold at Rio in the triathlon. And for, 20 plus years, her life goal was win an Olympic gold medal. And then she did it. So that's like the peak of what we're talking about here. Whereas here, I'm just some guy who wanted to break 3 hours in the marathon. And so, I don't know. That's been something I've talked about a little bit with her, but maybe I should go deeper on that. But then there's rim to rim to rim, where I emptied the tank. There was nothing left in my body.
Can you talk to me about that? Describe how you felt when you, from an energy perspective, or just fatigue, not just like just the general fatigue sense. Describe to me what that was like in the moment where you're like, this is the limit. I can't go any further.
So it was pretty incredible. So essentially, rim to rim to rim, you start on one side and go to the other and then come back.
Which say up the Grand Canyon. People don't know we're talking about the Grand Canyon.
So you can see where you've come, which is like pretty remarkable from a visual standpoint. So the first 21 miles was pretty decent. ran it as a group, had a lot of fun, had a nice little buffet on the North Rim. Again, pickles, Coke, chips, jerky, etc. Really lovely stuff. Then we come back, and I'm running with my buddy Tony, and at the 50K, we're running like 7-minute pace, 7:15 pace. And we're like, this is fucking awesome, but we're going to pay for this. So let's see where it goes. And then we paid for it, of course. So we get to, so the climb out is roughly a 10K, and you gain 6,000 feet. So it's basically 1,000 feet per mile.
Which, for people who don't know, think about the biggest hill you've ever climbed. In the steepness of it, it's a lot bigger than that.
Totally. So it was like that. And I started talking to my phone because I was like, I want to remember this. I want to remember how awful I feel right now. And the fact that this is the worst physically and mentally I've ever felt in my life. And I'm going to get through it because there's no option. There's nothing else to do but keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's it. That's the secret. That's the secret to anything. That's the secret to how you do anything. And here I was, like, stripped raw, and like nothing else mattered besides putting one foot in front of the other. And so it's like this beautiful metaphor for life. Again, how do you do anything? Well, you don't do everything all at once. You do things piece by piece. And so what I loved about this moment, where I had never been there mentally or physically, again, probably mile 40, we're 12 hours in. My longest run was 7 hours. And the options at the moment are give up, get a $15,000 helicopter ride out of there, or keep pushing forward. Again, epitome of life. Give up or keep pushing forward. So I've sort of leaned on that moment for two reasons. One, it's the, secret to life. And two, almost nothing I've done since has been that hard. With the exception of 4-pass loop from a few weeks ago, which was probably mentally more challenging. Physically, not sure. But again, few things since that was October of 2019. Very few things in my life have been that hard mentally or physically since then. And I think we need to go to those places. I think we need to do those things that just push us to our absolute limit, because I could go back and do it again and it would probably be easier.
Let's do it. Let's do it right now. So post Grand Canyon Jonathan can go back to 2017, 2018, when you were in the throes of trying to break 3 and very goal focused at the time, still working very hard, but maybe didn't have the same sort of mentality in a variety of different ways. What would you tell 2017, 2018 Jonathan just about fatigue and pushing through discomfort that you learned later on?
So I love asking this question on my podcast, and I do frequently. And what a lot of people will say is, I wouldn't tell that person anything because they just have to learn it. And that sort of answers the question of, like, why didn't you get it in the training log, or why didn't you get it in the coaching? Some stuff you just have to get through it. And I would tell that guy, like, this is going to suck, or whatever your goal is going to be really hard, and it's going to be awesome. And you'll have a similar goal in the future, and it seems impossible now. And it's this continued leveling up of, like, small, medium, large goals. What is like just outside your wheelhouse? What is pretty challenging, and what is, like, absolutely not. I could not consider doing that. If 2014 Jonathan heard about 2019 Jonathan or 2022 Jonathan and what he was doing now, he'd think you were on drugs and just, like, complete, or, like, talking about somebody else. And again, that's what I love about it, that the things I'm going to be doing in 2025, I probably think are absolutely insane for me to be doing right now. And they are right now. But fast forward a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, these things get a little more attainable and a little more attainable. And then we just get bigger goals. And then we just keep essentially reestablishing what's normal, possible, just outside the box. And that's how we grow. That's the growth mindset that like we're never like stasis is the enemy. I hate status quo. I hate being bored. And I hate this like I don't know, I see it all the time. People are just like so content with just getting by. And it's just like it's so boring. I've been in relationships where that's the case. I've had coworkers where that's the case. And it's just like, it's toxic and it brings everyone down. Whereas if you're of this growth mindset, everyone around you is better. Like what's the saying? Like you're the sum of the 5 people closest to you. Okay. So if you're listening to this podcast, think about the 5 people you spend the most time with. Are they helping you? Are they helping you grow? Maybe it's your kids. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's your training partner, or maybe it's like a toxic something that like you can't shake, or I don't know. I think it's an important exercise to go through every 6 to 12 months, that you just need to evaluate the people around you and the impact that they're having, and then the impact you're having on them.
All right. Some of the people that you spend time with, not just on the podcast, but in your everyday life, as you've already detailed a couple times with Kara and Gwen, are some of the best athletes in the country, right? You live in Boulder. There's a lot of high-level athletes there, not just from a running perspective, but in other areas as well. So what are some things that the general public gets wrong about these high-level athletes, both in terms of like they think X, Y, Z, but it's way beyond what's actually true? You mentioned ones already before in terms of like focusing on goals, right? They have a very different relationship to that, right? And other things, we might underinflate it. Like sometimes people think that like, hey, I think I know what that kind of speed actually feels like or looks like. And maybe they don't. Maybe it's like on a completely different level. So what are some things or misconceptions people have, both positive and negative, that you've been able to kind of come to some understanding about, given your time in Boulder amongst these people?
So it's an extreme privilege of who I get to surround myself around, but I don't think it's like impossible for anyone. Here, there are 100 people probably within 2 miles of me right now that most people listening would consider elite or professional athletes, just like in my neighborhood. Kate Grace was at my birthday celebration last night, and we were talking about her own recovery from COVID and the over reliance on metrics, or the like when to listen to metrics and when not to listen to metrics. And so I think a lot of people think that like pro athletes, they know their body and they know everything about how things operate. And that's not always the case. The piece that I always like highlighting when it comes to pro athletes in Boulder, that isn't really like a direct answer to your question, but the relationship around food within professional athletics, going back to Kate and her group, Team Boss, like if other runners, amateur or pro, emulated the relationship that Team Boss has around food, we'd have way less of a challenge with disordered eating and eating disorders. I don't want to stray too far outside of my lane on this discussion, which I feel is best reserved for a dietitian or someone who can like communicate it properly. But if you look at how they eat and how it's social, right? I was at Scratch last week, and their founder Alan Lim was talking about his experience on the tour and he's a sports scientist, exercise physiologist, and has, he's worked with Lance Armstrong and everyone in between Lance and amateur runners. And what Alan was saying was, on the tour, he made it mandatory for teams to eat together. People could not eat by themselves because he was working to facilitate this social atmosphere and this, like, it's like these guys were burning, more than most people eat in a week, and on a daily basis. And so it was like mission critical that they replenish that. And so one of the ways that he was able to do that was by establishing these sort of ground rules around, like, how do we consume food? What's the environment we do it in? And so it's a long way to answer your question of, like, what are the misconceptions? The misconceptions are that pro athletes are, like, nitpicky and they don't eat pizza and they, these kinds of things. Like, I was at Endeavor Run 2 weeks ago, and Lydia Nader is a sports dietitian from Chicago, and she was in charge of meals and fueling. And we started with a pizza dinner and we ended with a pizza dinner. And I haven't talked to her about this, but I feel like that was by design. Like, here's someone who is tasked with helping people understand, like, fueling for performance, and she's showing that it's okay to eat all foods. So again, anytime I have the opportunity to, like, share what I get to see with all of these pro athletes that I get to be around, it's always about food, joy, mindset, and the workouts don't matter. And I say that sort of in jest. Like, the workouts are, like, not the real main piece of the puzzle that I used to obsess over, and that, like, amateur runners.
Do you mean the execution of the workout, or like the X's and O's, like what's actually written down on the calendar?
I mean, being too focused on the tangible aspects of running, when truly the intangibles, the happiness that it brings you, the joy of being involved in the community, the gratitude that you get to do this, you have a body that works, and the people you get to do it with. If you can get that part, and the continued striving for progress, not perfection, if you can nail that aspect, the workouts are easy. The workouts are going to happen. I forget who the coach was that I was listening to on a podcast, and I forget what podcast it is, but now I want to know. But anyway, the point on in that discussion,
probably the Rambling Runner.
Totally. Yeah. Or For the Long Run. The conversation was, if you're doing all of the other stuff, and if the athlete is happy, they're going to succeed, and they're going to hit their time goals, and they're going to, like, the running doesn't do it. It's not the running. It's everything else that facilitates joy and growth and these adaptations that we're seeking from the runs. If you don't have joy, gratitude, growth mindset, appreciation for what you get to do, the running is going to suck, or you're not going to. It's just like, what's the point, right? We're not being paid to do it. Everyone has a podcast, so you don't need to run to have a podcast. It's just like, this has been the realization that, again, these people who are doing it at the highest level, yes, they focus on the X's and O's, and yes, they focus on the workouts, and yes, but they've figured out how to build running into their life versus how to build their life around running. And honestly, that's probably why I am a happier person in 2022 compared to 2017, because my life was running and it was dictated by metrics that I don't really have control over. that were objective metrics. Did I break 3, which is a completely arbitrary number? Who cares? And now it's like, do I have gratitude that I get to run? Like, I look outside my window right now. Again, place of privilege, but like I can see mountains, and I can do these things that make me so happy. And it takes 20 minutes to get up into the big mountains. And it's like hard to not have fun when this is the foundation that I've been able to build. And I'm not saying it's like daisies and unicorns and puppies and tacos all the time. It's not perfect. And if it were perfect, what I'd say is you're leaving potential on the table. Alexi Papa says that, you know, a good training routine feels great a third of the time, feels okay a third of the time, and feels awful a third of the time. That's the split that I'm looking for, because if you don't have those waves, it's so boring, and the highs aren't as high and the lows aren't as low. I was talking about this with Kara last week too. And again, all of these incredibly talented and conventionally successful athletes feel so similar about everything I'm saying right now. And so again, this mindset that I've been able to get to has been molded and melded from hundreds of conversations with, again, conventionally successful people. Now, defining success is also an incredibly useful exercise, and following how your definition of success evolves can tell you everything about what you need to know about yourself. Again, I used to consider success: did I break 3? Did I nail the workout? Did I hit my paces? Now it's like, did I have fun on that run? Did I get to do it with friends? Did I do it a little bit faster than last week? Did it feel a little bit easier? You get what I'm saying? And again, reflections on 225 episodes with conventionally successful people. Those who are conventionally successful often define success in a completely subjective manner in ways that they can control. What does that mean? It means that success is not they won an Olympic gold medal. Success is that they got the most out of their body on race day. Success is that they did everything they possibly could. Success is growth over a 10-year period. Completely subjective. Happiness, joy, gratitude, all these things I've been rambling about for the last, I don't know, however many minutes. And it's so fascinating, right? Because again, to get back to what I was saying initially, like, these are people who are paid to win and paid to compete. The other piece is that's shifting a little bit. Like, they're now a little more required to tell their story and to connect and to be real humans instead of just robots who compete and don't have any emotion. I think that's an incredible shift in the way that sponsorship works and the way that brands treat athletes, that they're investing in the whole human. But that's a completely different podcast. Anyway, it's such a cool thing. I'm just so grateful that like my path and my own mindset and growth and trajectory and like how I live my life is melded by this curiosity that I have of like, how do other people do it and what have they learned and how can I adapt what I'm doing to grow and to help others learn as well, right? Because like the whole reason I started my podcast was the realization that I was sitting on gold, and I was like, people were telling me things that should be shared and that I shouldn't just keep to myself, and that I felt were valuable to share with the community. So now I get to do it similar to how you get to do it. And it's so cool to be able to share these learnings with so many other people. And so that if a few less people have to like stumble and fail, that's a win.
I love it. I know you have a hard stop. We're butting up against it. So before we get going, I know you'd like to record a couple weeks out, sometimes even a couple months out. You're way better at planning ahead with a podcast than I am. We've talked about this in the past offline. With that said, it does give us the opportunity to plug some of your upcoming episodes. So who's going to be coming up on the podcast shortly?
Well, that's a great question. So Kara, we've spoken much about her. Her episode is coming out on August 26th. Addie Bracey did a fun one with her a couple weeks ago. That's 225. That's out. Danny Bent, it's going to be, I think, September 9th. Episode 230. This guy is he's responsible for the event that really got me into running. It happened 10 years ago in Boston, or almost 10 years ago in Boston, and it was a really fun conversation, again, around joy, gratitude, growth, and sharing experiences. Allison Desir, really looking forward to her podcast. That one will be out in October. And she's coming out with a book, Running While Black. Two of us are white males. We have a very different experience as runners than she does. And I think it's important to go there and to explore and to have these different voices and different perspectives on how we experience the art, the exercise of putting one foot in front of the other, and these things that we don't think about, she thinks about, and other communities think about. And I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but I'm looking forward to that one, and everything in between.
All right, John, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.